Sometimes even your favorite bands can let you down.
You blew it. Super hard. Complete buffoonery.
These are 10 more albums that, at least at the time, were serious disappointments to me, and we're starting with Between the Buried and Me and The Great Misdirect. Now, of all the albums I've derided over the years, this is probably the one that I get the most grief about. And even after seeing them perform it from start to finish live on tour, I still feel mostly the same. I was riding so high with this band after falling in love with the constantly rising quality of The Silent Circus, Alaska, and Colors. But then this dropped and it was enough to sour me on them for many years. Close one eye, step to this eye. Now, to be fair, that was definitely an overreaction because this album is still very impressive in its own right, and they rallied very quickly afterwards. There are plenty of great moments to be found, especially on Obfuscation, Fossil Genera, and of course, Swim to the Moon. Even so, this continues to be one of the last albums I reach for when I'm in the mood.
It's because most critics have shitty taste.
Next up is Dark Tranquillity with Construct. Another band I've loved pretty much every album from over the years, if to somewhat varying degrees. In my opinion, the best melodic death metal band of all time. If I'm being honest, they had already started falling off a little with 2010's somewhat uninspired We Are the Void, but it was Construct that really threw me for a loop 3 years later. Again, I've grown to appreciate what this album has to offer over the years, but the shift in production and seeming emphasis of atmosphere over riffs initially really turned me off. Founding guitarist Martin Henriksen left the band after this release, citing a loss of passion for playing music, and I've always wondered if that played into how I felt about it at the time.
Or maybe you're just really stupid.
Then we have At the Gates with At War with Reality. Comeback albums are hard, especially when your last album was nearly 20 years ago and frequently heralded as one of the greatest of all time. As a fan myself, I was super hyped up by the release of the title track, but when the album dropped, I found myself somewhat unsurprisingly let down given the sky-high expectations. It's not at all a bad album. In fact, over the years, it's grown to be one of my higher ranked albums in their overall discography. I think it just had some impossible shoes to fill after so much time away. These days, it's To Drink from the Night itself that finds itself towards the bottom for me, but thankfully, the somewhat surprising turn of The Nightmare of Being has rejuvenated my interest with them moving forwards. By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, be sure to hit the like button and comment your own biggest disappointments below. But next up, we have Korn with Untouchables. Now, I've spoken about this album a number of times, including my discography tier list, but once more, this was one of my biggest disappointments of my high school years. Issues continues to be one of my favorite albums, not only for the band, but just in general, and given the strength of everything leading up to that, I felt like the good times would never end. This album's not without the usual solid singles, including Here to Stay and Thoughtless featuring a young Jesse Pinkman. But really, I think this is a prime example of what happens when a band is left to freely revel in their excess. Costing an estimated $3 million to make over 2 years, and yet comparatively, I feel like the production sounds like shit. I'd still herald it as one of their last sort of golden era albums, but if you ask me, their decline already started with this one. Then there's Periphery with Juggernaut. This one is menacing and will not leave us be. Another album I actually quite enjoy these days, but man did I straight up hate this thing when it released. I'm already biased against most double albums in general, given that I don't think that most bands are capable of pulling them off, but the real issue here was that coming off of some of their best work on Periphery 2, this felt like some overly pop-driven Hot Topic music to me at the time. I always appreciated Periphery's clean sections despite what the detractors had to say, but this just felt like a bridge too far with tracks like Alpha and Heavy Heart in particular. Again, now I love how catchy and infectious those tracks are, but it just took me a while to adjust.
I was wrong.
Then there's Mastodon with The Crack the Sky is easily this band's crowning achievement in my eyes. It took everything that was already great about Leviathan and Blood Mountain, but absolutely perfected it. Then we got Whatever This Is. Now there are way worse albums out there, but I just expected so much more from this band given their history, and frankly, I don't feel like they've ever fully recovered from it.
It's just a color of the world. It's just a color of the world.
The songs here, in my opinion, of course, are just boring, messy, and completely forgettable. The only song I really enjoy is Deathbound and its accompanying puppet music video, but that's not even part of the standard track listing. Next up is All That Remains with Overcome.
I don't believe that this way.
There was a time where these guys were one of my favorite bands and at the top of the heap of 2000s metalcore. This Darkened Heart absolutely blew me away, and as if that wasn't good enough, they only managed to top themselves with The Fall of Ideals. But then came the decline with this 2008 album.
I can see that you turn to stone. Still living, I can hear you say.
There are still some classic status tracks to be found here that plenty of fans will talk about, including 2 Weeks and Chiron, but through a combination of shifting away from Adam D's production and a sudden uptick in the sappy, cringeworthy, clean choruses, this just felt like a punch in the face to me. Ever since then, they've become more or less the poster child of bands falling off, in my opinion, though I did surprisingly enjoy 2018's Victim of the New Disease. Then there's Fleshgod Apocalypse with King.
In this vast world.
Now, I actually think that this band is still hitting some of their peak material with Veleno, but King was definitely a mixed bag for me. After the whirlwind chaos of albums like Agony and Labyrinth, this one really slows things down almost to a doomy degree for tracks like Syphilis, Gravity, and Cold as Perfection. There's some real bangers on here, like In Aeternum and the excellent harpsichord-infused The Fool, but the overall shift in pace just wasn't to my liking. I prefer my death metal to go fast and hard, and if I am wanting to slow things down on the symphonic side, I'd much rather go with Septic Flesh. Good stuff, but just not what I was looking for. Then there's Tool with 10,000 Days. This is another pick that regularly turns heads when I bring it up. People love to talk ad nauseum about how disappointing Fear Inoculum was, but come on, that album was just destined to be a letdown.
Was built weak and born to fail.
This one, on the other hand, is largely beloved by fans, but is the one that actually soured me first. Some of my personal favorite tracks here, including Zombie, Vicarious, The Pot, and Right in 2, but in between there's a lot of downtime. I know that tracks like Lipen Conjuring and Lost Keys are meant to be more atmospheric and add to the conceptual side of the record, but I always skip them now. And furthermore, even the tracks people praise, like the Wings series and Rosetta Stone, feel pretty inconsistent in terms of overall engagement. Cue the Keyboard Warriors.
I am shocked and appalled.
And then we have Incubus with Like Grenades. This one hurt. As I mentioned in my latest best non-metal albums video, I loved this band in their heyday. They were probably in my top 3 for most of high school. Science, Make Yourself, and Morning View are still pretty much perfect albums in my mind, and A Crow Left of the Murder, though not quite as strong, is still a good one. This, on the other hand, it's a mess. For one thing, it's all over the place. It just feels like a slapped-together collection of random nonsense. And perhaps more importantly, the songwriting takes a real nosedive, especially with corny, contrived bullshit like Love Hurts and Diamonds and Coal. Animali and A Kiss to Send Us Off are pretty decent. I do enjoy Brandon's performance on Dig, but once more, I think the bonus tracks from the Japanese version are the superior ones here in Punch Drunk and Look Alive. Regardless, I'd never loved the band as much as I did before this album. Y'all check out this playlist for more disappointing albums, or this one for my favorite metal albums of the year so far. And again, let me know yours down below. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.